Alright folks, welcome back to the channel. Today's adventure brings me into Dryden, New York. I'm going to head out on the Dryden Lake, see what there is out there. Also, tell you the sad story of a decade here in Dryden that left a lot of scars in this little town. So let's head out and paddle. Welcome back to the channel. This is Dryden Lake, and it's not a big body of water at all. It'd almost be considered a pond. It is in Dryden, New York, which is down here in the Finger Lake region of New York, and I will tell you that this is the water here kind of reminds me of the Genesee River in Rochester. If you've ever seen the Genesee River, it's got that light brown color to it. That's what this has. And I've already been greeted by 2 snakes swimming around in the water. Of all my years paddling in the Adirondacks, I've probably encountered 2 snakes in the water. I've already encountered 2 in the first 15 minutes out here today. So interesting. Not that I'm worried about them. I have no idea what kind of snakes they are. They didn't swim to me. They kind of swam away from me. So I don't think that they're too awfully worried about me. But this is a lake that has no gas motors on it. Must be pretty good for fishing because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kayakers out here with fishing, and so I thought this would be an interesting paddle because I became familiar with Dryden, New York, back in the 90s when I was doing my fire training. I did a lot of my fire training with the city of Rochester, and I also did some training with the city of Corning, which is all. Rochester is probably maybe an hour and a half from here, and Corning's not that far from here. And Dryden, there was a decade in which Dryden was in the news almost every year because of tragic and horrific events that kept happening in this village. And I was remembered, I was in, I think it was Corning, when one of those events happened. The story of a couple of the cheerleaders here at a local high school that came up missing and then were found later on murdered. But really, this village has earned online the nickname the Village of the Damned, and it's I know the locals don't like that slogan for their little village, but for a decade this area was Village of the Damned. I mean, from 1989, the events really started. From 89 to 99, there was a lot of stuff that happened here that Lifetime could not. Lifetime, the movie network, they couldn't come up with this stuff. It started in, I think it was in December of 1989, where a family was executed in their own home. It was a neighbor that was robbing them and ended up killing them, killed the whole family, and then caught the house on fire. We never found out why he did it because he was killed in a shootout with the troopers. And then everything was quiet for a couple of years when one of the local teenagers committed suicide, with a lot of them people thinking that she was a victim of a domestic violence, that her boyfriend was very controlling and would very jealous, and a lot of people, the theory is that her only way out was to kill herself. But then that boy ended up dating another girl, and when she started to see how he was, she cut it off with him. And early one morning, he came to her house, and her father was the local football coach here, and her father was the one that stepped in front of him. He had a shotgun. He shot the father, but the father's actions of stepping in front of him saved his family, because his daughters and wife were able to escape the home. And they never found out why this guy went nuts, because he ended up leaving the scene and going to a local cemetery to where his ex-girlfriend is buried, the one that committed suicide, and he committed suicide there. So then, that was the football coach. I think it was a couple years later that one of the star football players here was killed in a car accident during the season. It was September, and exactly 1 year later, another star football player was killed in a car accident. And the weird thing about it, the two were brothers. But that's not all about the football team. Now you get into the cheerleaders. A month after that car accident, there were two cheerleaders that were staying at a house, local house. The parents were gone for the weekend, so there was 3 girls that were going to stay there. But one of the girls didn't end up going. And when it came to the football game that night, those 2 girls that were staying together didn't show up for the game. And a lot of people were saying, oh, you know, parents are gone, so they probably took off up to Syracuse to the mall. But the girl that was supposed to stay with them, the other cheerleader, she said no, something's wrong. They would not miss a game. They would not go to the mall to miss a game. So a trooper went out to check the house. There was obvious signs of a struggle in the house. He closed the house up. It became a crime scene. The girls weren't there. They were missing. Word after the football game was that they were missing, that they weren't there. And that was the weekend I was training in Corning. That's where we heard about it on the news. They had searches out. It wasn't until Sunday, a weird series of events that led to the capture and finding these 2 girls happened. So in a quirk of fate, a few days after these cheerleaders were missing and the searches were going on, a lady went to her cabin, her family's cabin, and they found blood in the cabin. And she was there with her fiance, I think it was, and they contacted police. The police showed up, and when they started to do the interview of who owned the cabin, they found out that the neighbor of the 2 cheerleaders that were missing was the lady's brother, and it was the family cabin. And so then they started to kind of put the pieces together that, So they did some testing, and the blood came back to the girls. So they started the search at the cabin. The cabin was about an hour away from here. and they ended up finding the girls. They ended up zeroing in on the neighbor. The neighbor did act suspicious during questioning, and they ended up arresting him. And that was the big news down here, because I remember I do believe I was at the Corning training when all this was happening, and this is how I know about the story of Dryden. And one of the reasons why I picked Dryden Lake today, I'm not staying too far away. I'm staying about 15 minutes away from here. So I picked Dryden Lake today to paddle. And because this story, you just can't make this stuff up. So the two girls were found. They were dead. The guy was arrested, but he never went to trial because he ended up committing suicide in jail. And something splashing over here. Oh, we got ducks swimming over here. But they make sure I don't run aground behind me here. But that's not where the story ends. That third cheerleader that was supposed to be with those girls that night, and she wasn't. Just 3 years later, she is killed in a car accident. The driver of the car was drunk and ended up going to prison. But it doesn't stop there. The weirdness of this is that one of the friends he lost his two friends in football to a car accident, and then he lost his friends, the cheerleaders, to a horrific crime. And then another friend of his is killed in this car accident, that third cheerleader, and he decided that it was just too much for him, and he ended up walking. He suffered from depression, and he ended up walking off into the woods and committing suicide himself. And there was a few other incidents that happened here. I think there was one here of a mother that reported her toddler daughter missing, and ended up mailing Mitten to herself to make it look like her daughter was kidnapped, but they ended up finding the daughter in the woods nearby, and so she ended up getting arrested. And this all happened in this little village of Dryden. And so there is a YouTube video, and there is a Discovery show that's called Village of the Dam, and it's all about the murders here. There's a book about it, but really since then, the locals do have a memorial to all these people, especially the cheerleaders that were killed. But the football coach, 2 football players, actually 3 football players, and cheerleaders of the football team. It was a horrific decade for Dryden, New York. Such a small little town, and so much in just 10 years. But the scars remain here, but it is a nice little village. I mean, down here in Central New York, this is part of my Central New York tour down here, and one thing I've noticed about driving around down here is that it's very hilly, and you come over one hill and you're like, oh wow, look at that view, and then you go down into the valley and you come up over that hill, and then it's a whole new view. It's just one right after another, and it's a neat area down here. A lot of vineyards and a lot of wine down here. There's apple orchards down here. There's some good sized farming communities down here. Yeah, today is a decent day. It's about 74 degrees. It's not too awful warm, but horrific events that even the Lifetime movie network couldn't come up with. But the village has dealt with it. They have memorials to it here, but they don't like the Village of the Dam. They don't like that motto on their village, and I don't blame them. It's a nice area, but I'm gonna paddle around a little bit more, and hopefully don't run across any more snakes. All right, folks, you watched all the way through. Thanks for that. If you liked the video, make sure to give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, click the subscribe button down below. Continue to follow the adventure. And remember, folks, tomorrow is no guarantee for any one of us. So disconnect from that Wi-Fi connect to this out here, you won't be disappointed.